The Testaments, Season 1, Episode 10, is almost here. And honestly, what more do we even need to say at this point? Episode 9 did everything it needed to do to get us absolutely spiraling before the finale. The hooded figures at the end of that episode, by the way, creepy as anything. We were not ready for that shot, and we are still thinking about it. But okay, let's get into it, because there's a lot to unpack about where this finale could go. The centerpiece of everything going into Episode 10 is obviously Becca's fate. She stabbed her father to death in a bathtub with garden shears. The eyes have presumably taken her. In Gilead, that should be an open-and shut case. Patricide equals execution, full stop. And yet, we genuinely do not think the show is going to go there. Here's why. The trailer. There is a shot of Becca in what looks very much like a wedding dress. Now, is that real, or is it a dream sequence? We cannot say for certain, but it planted a seed, and we have been theorizing ever since. On top of that, Becca is fertile, and Gilead, above all else, is a regime that treats fertility like a resource it cannot afford to squander. Would they really execute someone who can still serve the system's most fundamental purpose? We tend to think the answer is no, unless they absolutely cannot find another way out of this. The mental illness cover. The aunt spin the whole thing as a breakdown. Becca was clearly not in her right mind. They say grief, shock, and trauma caused they arrange a quick marriage between her and Garth to quietly remove her from public scrutiny. Garth gets a wife, Becca avoids execution, and Gilead gets to pretend the whole thing never happened. Garth is a wild card here, though. We want to believe he wouldn't want to see her seriously hurt, but he also has his own position to protect. That tension is going to be fascinating to watch play out. The intruder theory. Here is something that got overlooked a little in Episode 9. Becca left the front door open when she fled the house. That is a detail the show did not put in there by accident. If the eyes or the ants want a way to bury this quietly, there is your plausible deniability. An intruder broke in. Dr. Grove was the victim of a random attack. Nobody has to answer for anything. Aunt Lydia would obviously know that is complete nonsense, but Aunt Lydia knowing something and Aunt Lydia acting on it are very different things. Self-defense, plain and simple. This one feels like the most emotionally satisfying outcome, but also probably the least likely given how Gilead actually operates. Still, if the truth about Dr. Grove's abuse comes fully to light, there is at least an argument to be made. We just don't trust Gilead to make it. The handmaid to aunt pipeline. Okay, this one is our wildest theory, and honestly, we kind of love it. What if Becca is briefly assigned as a handmaid placed in Agnes's household under Paula, of all people, who is unhinged but then attempts to take her own life? That would explain that clip from the trailer of Paula running toward a bathtub, screaming, "What did you do?" Becca survives, and Aunt Lydia, recognizing something in her, pulls strings to get her reclassified as an aunt. A former handmaid becoming an aunt? That is a storyline we would watch for 3 more seasons without complaint. While Becca is at the center of the plot mechanics, the emotional core of the finale might actually be Agnes. Think about what just happened to her. She went to her parents, whom she still, on some level, believed in and asked for help. She thought Becca was going to get care and protection. What she got instead was her friend handed over to the eyes. That is a specific kind of wound. And we think Episode 10 is going to be about Agnes reckoning with what it means when the people who were supposed to keep you safe turn out to be the ones who put you in danger. If you're Agnes right now, you are not just grieving your friend's situation, you are rebuilding your entire understanding of who your family actually is. That awakening is, we think, the bigger thematic story of this finale. It's not just about whether Becca lives or dies. It is about what these young women decide to do with the truth once they can no longer pretend it isn't there. Daisy's arc going into the finale is the one we have the least clarity on, which is frustrating and also sort of impressive from a storytelling standpoint. As Plum, she has a cover identity that has given her a certain amount of movement inside Gilead's structure, but that cover only holds up for so long, especially now that things are unraveling around her. One thing worth flagging. If you have read Margaret Atwood's source novel, you might be tempted to go in with certain expectations about Daisy's storyline specifically. But it is looking more and more like the show is not following the book on that particular reveal. They are taking Atwood's framework and doing something different with it. So even book readers are probably going to be surprised by where Daisy ends up. It's worth saying this whole series is taking creative liberties while still respecting the major beats of the original material. Season 1 is clearly going to end before the full story is resolved. There's way too much plot still on the table for one finale to wrap up neatly. If you watch The Handmaid's Tale all the way through, you already know the playbook here. These shows do not end seasons with clean resolutions. They end them with a door left open or sometimes a door slammed shut in a way that makes the next one feel urgent. We would be genuinely shocked if episode 10 tied everything up. The preamble for this series has already told us that many of these characters survive to see Gilead fall, but it has not told us which ones or how. That ambiguity is doing a lot of work. The finale is almost certainly going to answer some questions about Becka, while leaving Daisy and Agnes in positions that demand a second season. And speaking of which, Hulu moved pretty fast on that renewal announcement, which is a good sign for how confident they are in this show. If production on Season 2 gets rolling in the near future, we could realistically be looking at a return around this same time next year. Fingers crossed that timeline holds, is where we land heading into the finale. Becka almost certainly does not get executed, but whatever happens to her is not going to be clean or easy. Agnes is on the verge of a shift that changes her entire trajectory. Daisy is still a wild card, and the show is going to end with at least one thread left deliberately unresolved. We personally would love to see this series run for 3 or 4 seasons minimum. There's so much depth still to explore across all of these characters and their relationships with each other, with Gilead, and with the idea that resistance is even possible inside a system designed to prevent it. Episode 10 drops May 27th on Hulu. If you're watching internationally, Disney Plus has you covered. And if you want to know how all of this eventually resolves, the book is always there. Just know going in that the show and the source material are diverging in at least a few key ways. We'll be watching, and honestly, we're a little nervous about it. I appreciate you watching.